Give me just a second here. It will be recording. So we're now recording. So Jeff, I don't know where you got your prison uniform. Maybe that was part of the mugshot that they took.
No, this is my shirt for stop or slow. Right?
This is your artist statement, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is my paint shirt.
A paint shirt. So I'm going to. You are now spotlighted, Jeff.
I feel honored.
And you say, I don't think you need to share the screen, so I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. And thank you very much for doing this program tonight and next week.
You're welcome. Okay, so jumping in real quick here because I got a lot of material to cover in a short period of time to do it in. I want to thank Jerry Boone, who made this possible by carving 4 carvings for me to paint. Because I really haven't been doing much carving. And so he made that possible. So what he carved for me was 2 Santa Clauses and 2 Christmas trees. So they have a lot of different painting techniques in the 2 styles. So let's see. The reason that I volunteered to do this is because I have seen a lot of carvings and I've judged some shows, and what I commonly see is that a good paint job can take a mediocre carving and make it look really good. A bad paint job can take a good carving and make it look bad. And I have seen a lot of cases where people have not gotten a ribbon or got any mention or anything at all for a relatively good carving because they have done a terrible job of painting it. What I commonly see, and I'm not going to ask or take roll on this, you folks all know, but amongst the men carvers, there is probably at least 25% of the men that carve are colorblind. So when you get into painting, that causes complications. There's red-green colorblind and there's blue-green colorblind, and I see blue trees and all sorts of weird, pink American eagles, all sorts of weird stuff. What I also commonly see is that a lot of times the carvers will settle in on the primary colors, and we never use primaries. If you're familiar with the color wheel, you have your primaries, your secondaries, and your tertiaries. Okay, the tertiaries are where you want to go for the best looking paint jobs on your carvings. That would be, so your primaries are red, yellow, and blue. Your secondaries are orange, purple, and green, right? Your tertiaries would be your yellow, orange, or your red, orange, your blue, green, or your yellow greens, your purple blues or red, greenish blues, those in between colors.
Jeff, we lost you. Let's go see. Brian, is he frozen?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what?
We lost you for about 45 seconds. At least I did. Brian, did he freeze up on you?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so we lost about the last 30 to 45 seconds of you.
I assure you I didn't go anywhere.
No.
Okay, I was talking about the colors, the primaries, secondaries, and tertiaries.
Right, you got the tertiary.
Okay.
You got the tertiaries, yeah.
Okay, so what I commonly see with, and it's usually with the guys that do this, is they apply the paint straight out of the bottle onto the carving. They don't put any water into their paint. You need to thin the paint. This session is going to be focused on acrylic paints, okay? Acrylic paints are preferred by a lot of carvers because they're thinned with water. There's no flammable substances required. They come in a wide variety of pre-mixed colors, which helps for the colorblind people, because if you have the name of the color that you're supposed to use, you can go find that bottle of paint, right? And you know that that's the right color. Whereas oils, you only have 9 or 10 different colors of oil paint. You have to mix all your shades and hues. So the acrylics are easier for those purposes. The downside of acrylics is they kill brushes. They just kill your brush. So it takes a lot of brush care in order to paint with acrylics. Acrylics dry quickly, whereas oils dry slowly. So you can finish a project pretty speedy in acrylics. So the first project that I'm going to work on tonight is a Christmas tree. And I'm going to switch to the webcam here and show you the finished piece. Once again, this was the blank was provided by Jerry Boone. So this is just a nice festive holiday looking Christmas tree. Okay, I don't know if you can tell from the picture there, but you can see the wood through the paint. The paint is applied very thin and washes. My projects are accomplished in 2 steps. There's a soft painting step, and then there's a detail painting step, okay? In the soft painting step, you're going to apply water to your carving first with a big brush and get it wet. Then you're going to put your colors on, and you're going to be able to create real subtle, soft blendings between colors because of the diffusion of the paint and the water, okay? So the first step for all these to make these look good as possible is I start with a product called Minwax Natural, which is their product number 209. All this stuff is referenced in that handout, by the way. So what I do is like the day before I want to paint, I flood the carvings with using a sponge brush applicator. And this was your standard featureless white basswood. This stuff had no visible grain in it when I started. I think I did the backs too, but this stuff, it's like your good, nice white basswood. It had no visible grain at all. So if you want the grain to show up through your paint, this is a good step. So do the Minwax Natural the day before you want to paint. And as you can see on here, you can see wood grain. This almost looks like pine or something, but it just started out as your featureless white basswood. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a large brush and I'm going to apply water to this thing. And I'm applying, a good amount of water because in Arizona, things dry out really quickly. In Oregon, they dry out much slower. So because of that, I'm going to have to work some of these steps. I'm going to have to work them pretty quick. So I'm not going to be able to slow down. And I would recommend when you're painting that you turn off your phone, because you can't just stop and take a call in the middle, right? The thing about acrylics is they dry quickly and you'll end up with ugly brush strokes. And then if you try to fix it by putting on more paint, then you're too thick and you've blown the whole idea of painting thin. So I just put a lot of water on this carving to begin with to get it wet. This technique I learned from Debbie Edwards and Desiree Haney, two painters of true renown. Okay, so on your handout for this project, you can see I've outlined 3 colors of green: a base coat, a highlight, and a shadow. I'm going to start out with the base coat or the mid-tone, and I'm going to put some of this on my palette. Slide this over where you can see it. So don't be skimpy with the paint. Go ahead and put some out there. Then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to bring water over to my palette. not just a little bit. I'm going to bring quite a bit over. Then I'm going to pull paint into the water. Now, things about acrylic painting. Never get your brush more than halfway saturated with paint. You do not want the paint to get up to the ferrule. So you only want to load it halfway. And I'm mixing up a thin wash of this green paint. Okay, so now I'm going to take and I'm going to quickly apply it. You're not painting a tractor or a barn. The goal is not to have completely even solid paint over the whole carving. You want some areas that are thinner than others. It puts variety into the painting and makes it look more artistic. As you can see, I'm going pretty quick at this. I'm making sure I get all the underneath surfaces and around the back, or the sides, I should say. And I get the paint into all the low areas. If I need to, I'll pull some more water out to my palette. And I'm just doing kind of like a base coat here. And you're not trying to get it to look all completely like you rattle canned it or painted it with a roller. Right? You're not painting a barn or a tractor. When you're painting, it's the same as when you're carving. What brush should I use? The largest tool that makes the shape you're trying to create. If you use too small of a brush, then you're going to have all sorts of little itty bitty brush marks all over the thing. And that's not what we're going for. So you can see I'm using a 1-inch brush to do this. And you don't want it to pool up and leave a real dark spot. So you can go back and you can kind of, do a little blending and distribution on it. But there's my mid-tone base coat. So as you can see, it's not one solid color. There should never be any place on your carving that is one solid color. When you're done, rinse your brush out good. You should always have folded up paper towel. Some of the ladies, they use a roll of toilet paper that's dedicated for offloading water. But you want to rinse out your brush and offload the water. And then I'm going to show you real quick with the camera here, the type of brush holder that you want to get. See this thing with the spring where you put the brushes in and the bottom part holds the water? The brushes are down. You do not want to use those buckets where you stick your handle in the bucket and the brush bristles are up. That allows water and paint to flow into the ferrule, and you've ruined your brush if you've done that. You want to keep paint out of the ferrule. So this is the only approved paintbrush holder for acrylic. I use them for everything, but this is the way to go, okay? If you do it the other way, you're just going to be throwing away your brushes. So there's the base coat color. So moving on, I'm going to take my shadow color, which listed in that handout is black green. The handout has the names of the paints, and it also has the manufacturers. There's a little legend on there that shows you which is which. Okay, for this, adding in the shadows, you always put your brush in water first. Never put a dry brush into acrylic paint. You'll kill the brush. So I'm getting my brush wet. I've got my black green paint here. I can't get all this in the screen at once here. There's my black green, my shadow. So I'm going to bring water over to my palette, which is just a white paper plate, so it's disposable. Those plastic white palettes, yeah, those are cool, but then you got to clean them later, and they're a pain in the butt. So a white, slick surface paper plate will do just fine, okay? So I'm going to mix up my shadow color, then I'm going to get in here, and I'm going to start putting shadows in around the bottoms of these branches. I'm using a skew chisel brush, which I like because it's got a point that I can use. And I'm blending out the transition lines. So there's no hard edges on what I'm doing. When I blend that out, I just clean my brush real quick and put it in the water, and then use water to blend the transition zones so I don't have hard lines. You got to work quick with acrylics. Like I said, don't be taking a phone call in the middle of all this or you're going to blow it. And I'm working with a new pair of glasses tonight, which are progressives, my first pairs of glasses I've ever had. So I'm trying to learn how to tilt my head and do all that nonsense. It's better to have your paint too thin and say you don't get quite enough coverage. You can come back and paint it some more. If you get your paint too thick, it's too thick and there's no fixing it. It's already messed up. So I'll get this, I'll get these shadows placed in, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So you have to always have that paper towel or roll of toilet paper right next to your palette so you can offload excess water from your brush. And I think I need a little bit more shadow up here. So I'm gonna go in and put a little bit more in. What some people will do, and I'm not this skilled, but if you watch Debbie Edwards or Desiree Haney, they will actually hold two paint brushes in their hand at once. One's for the wet brush for blending, and the other is the brush for applying paint. And they'll swap back and forth between them. And if you're real coordinated, that's the thing to do. But I can't dance and I can't work two paintbrushes at once. So I'm putting in my shadows. I got to keep tipping my head to get my right focal length in with these glasses. And that's a little disconcerting. There we go. That's in focus. Good. Okay. Blending here and there. So I'm going to turn that around. Now you can see how parts of the tree are shaded. There is shadow. Okay. So the next I'm going to do my highlight color. For my highlight color, I'm using Hauser Green Light, which is an Americana color. And it's a yellowy, kind of a sappy green. You can see that in the picture. So for my highlight areas, those are going to be the high spots. And use the damp brush to blend the edges so you don't see any hard transitions. Paint's getting a little thick, so I'm going to pull some more water over to it, because because like I said, we're not painting a tractor or a barn. And you don't want any one part of your carving to ever be just one solid flat color. You want to mix your shades and hues and make it interesting. That's the stuff that's going to catch a judge's eye. And I have had to send people home without ribbons when they were convinced they had really created a masterpiece and they had done a, a good job of carving on something, but then they destroyed it with a horrible paint job. As you can see, I'm working pretty fast here. Because in Arizona, these paints dry super fast. I mean, there's times when you can't get your brush into it before it's dry on the palette. I think we're sitting about 6% humidity in the valley here today. And I don't think you ever see that kind of dryness in Oregon, maybe Eastern Oregon. Okay, so there I've got highlights. Doesn't look as good in the screen as it does here in the room. But I don't know if you can see it, but there's 3 different colors of green represented there. None of them are John Deere tractor green. All right, now I'm going to do a little bit with the trunk of the tree. Shake your paints up. Shake them up every time, because acrylic paints will separate out and you'll have the clear acrylic vehicle, and then that's all that'll come out and you won't get any pigment. So you want to shake your paints up really good every time.
Jeff, do you still want to wait for questions?
Not yet, no. Okay. Let me get this tree trunk done, and then we can have a little pause for questions. So I'm going to use raw sienna. And before I do this, since things have dried out a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and just put some more water on my tree trunk, because stuff dries out quick. The Minwax Natural it's called a sealer, but it's a penetrating sealer, right? So it doesn't really put a hard, it's not a topical. So you can get it wet, and then you can get these soft color blending. Now, none of these carvings here tonight the finished ones have been painted and sprayed with an acrylic spray varnish, matte finish, but they haven't been antiqued. That would be another class. So if you can see there, see how it's thin and you can see the wood through the paint? That's your goal. Now I'm gonna, in order to make it not be one solid color, I'm gonna grab something called mudstone. This is all in your handout. It is just kind of a grayish, brownish kind of a color. Put some of that on my palette, shake it up really good first. Don't need much of this. And I'm going to bring a little water over to it to thin it out a bit using my skew chisel brush. Right now I'm using about a 1/2 inch brush. And I'm going to offload some excess paint onto my paper towel. Then I'm going to come in and just kind of hit a couple spots here and there in the fashion of the late great Bob Ross. And I'm just going to put a happy little tree trunk here. A glorious little tree trunk. So what I've done is I've just mixed. Yeah, that's blocking. Let's not do that with whatever that chat is, because it's blocking the view of the tree. There we go. Okay. So as you can see, that's not all one solid color. There's a little bit of gray in it, a little bit of the brown color. And I could actually take a few questions at this point while I'm going to paint just do a base coat on the star at the top with some metallic silver. That's not real exciting. So you can ask some questions right now if you wish.
So I'll relay a few of them. One of them you partially answered about the Minwax, about how does it absorb water well, or just a little bit?
It does.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's not a topical sealer. It's a penetrating sealer.
Can you talk more about how much you put on, how long you let it dry?
Well, it dries. What you mean of the Minwax?
The Minwax itself, yeah.
Yeah, you flood it on with a foam applicator like it says on the instructions, and you let it dry. Give it 24 hours. Down here in Arizona, it's probably dry at about 6 hours, but up there in Oregon and Washington, you're going to want to give it a full 24 hours of drying time. So that's why I said do the Minwax the day before you want to do the paint.
So does it raise the grain, and do you have to do anything?
No, it does
about
not.
that?
No, it does not raise the grain, and it actually keeps the water that you put on in the painting phase from raising the grain.
Another question.
There you go. Okay, yes.
Where do you source your paints? Where do you buy them?
At any place that sells paints. Joann Fabrics, Michelle's, or Michael's, I should say, Craft Warehouse, Hobby Lobby, any of those places sell acrylic paints.
Okay. So the harder question is about the color choices that you made. So you're demonstrating technique, but how did you choose the colors to put on?
I used my brain and my eyes. I was tested when I went in the Air Force 40 years ago, and I did not have color blindness. So I can see the difference between a bluish green and a yellowish green. And just from painting many projects and hanging out with painters like Jim, who doesn't paint blue trees, I've just picked colors that are compatible. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little bottles of different colors of acrylic paint. So I don't even worry about the names of them. I store them. Hey, Kathy, I store them so that I can't even see the labels. I can only see the bottoms of the bottles. I have one of those, several of those paint racks. So I stick them in cap first. So all I see is the bottom of the bottle, and I pick the color. And that's part of being an artist. And that's not something that can really be explained, is you pick the colors that look good. Don't pick the colors that look bad. That's why I said go for tertiaries, stay away from the primaries. Primaries look bad. You can't use Kubota orange or John Deere green or Ford blue or any of those.
So Jeff, those of us that are mere mortals that are still learning this game, trial and error probably is one technique, but let's say that we painted what you had and what it did with different color choices and didn't like it. Could we paint over those?
No.
Do you have to start from scratch? You're stuck. You have to carve from scratch and start over?
You're screwed, because you don't want thick paint. Thick paint looks like it's made out of plastic or ceramic, and that will not go over well at a show.
So practice on a piece of scrap somewhere.
You can do that. That's highly recommended. You can have a scrap board, just a piece of light colored wood of any kind, throw some Minwax on it, let it dry, and you can use that as a test board.
Okay.
But as you can
So
see,
here's another question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So another question about Minwax. She says, I use Minwax pre-stain instead of 209. What is the
Yeah,
advantage of 209?
it's better. It's superior. It's what I have experience with. It's what I was shown to use by some of the better caricature carvers, like Chris Hammock and Rich Weatherby, and you've got your other crowd that prefer boiled linseed oil, which is just messy and smelly and nasty. And Minwax is already pre-mixed. It's easier to work with because it comes in a little can. You don't have to boil anything, and it has a drying agent added into it, which speeds up the drying time to only 24 hours. So it goes on good with an applicator brush. It's a flood on product. You flood it on there. You don't brush it on, you flood it, and it's impossible to screw it up. That's one of the reasons why I like it, is it's just bulletproof. And it's what I have experience with.
Do you have experience with the pre-stain?
I have used that before as a for like really soft woods that accept stain unevenly, right? Because basswood wants to blotch if you try to put like stain that has pigment in it on there. But the pre-stain kind of gets the wood so that it accepts colored stain evenly. And I don't care about that because I'm not adding stain to it. Right. So I use the Minwax Natural because it is the vehicle without the pigment. And it brings the color, the wood grain out of the wood. It makes it look like wood. Whereas the pre-stain doesn't. The pre-stain is just for prepping the wood prior to putting Minwax stain on it. Okay, the pre-stain also, its job is to actually block saturation of the wood with the Minwax stain. So it doesn't allow the Minwax stain to soak into the wood as much. It blocks it. That's why it's pre-stain. It's prep. It's more of a wood prep. All right.
Which last question, Jeff, would shellac be a sealer and not appropriate?
I don't use shellac. Other people do. That's a personal preference. The final step of what I do, final steps are an antiquing process. And you don't want to try to antique these things over shellac. There's a whole science to layers of water and layers of acrylic, barrier layers, if you will. And if you're going to antique something, you want barrier layers of water-based acrylic before you put your oil-based antiquing on the top, right? So no shellac, not for these processes.
Yeah. So John Wheeler asked, is Minwax acrylic superior to other acrylics?
Minwax, there is no Minwax and acrylic words that go together. Minwax is an oil-based thing.
So John Wheeler, so in the handout, there's a list of the specific paints by brand,
right?
That Jeff is using, and none of those are Minwax.
The only Minwax in there is Minwax Natural, product number 209 at the top of the list as your first step.
Okay, that's it for the questions, Jeff.
All righty. Well, that is the soft painting for the Christmas tree project. Okay, so now before you do the detail paint, which is all the, we dry brush some snow on there, we put all garland and tinsels and all that kind of stuff. Before you do any of that detail work, you have to put a coat of sealer, topical sealer, over what you've painted. That topical sealer that I use is, where's my bottle of sealer? It's listed on the paper. I can run and grab it. It's sitting in the other room. But that would be the Americana multi-purpose sealer. Do not use the Delta Sagram coat, use the Americana. It dries clear. And you just paintbrush a coat over the whole tree of that topical sealer. When it dries, it then provides a barrier so that water can't get through. Then you can do your fine detail work and you won't have that diffusion effect. Here we wanted diffusion. That's why we put water on it to begin with, to get soft color blending, okay? When you do your detail paint, which is the second phase, which will be next week, we'll detail paint both projects. You want to have them sealed with the Americana multi-purpose sealer first. That stuff takes about 20 minutes, sometimes a half an hour to dry. When you apply it with a brush. Make sure you get into all the little crevices and underneath areas. And then when you're done, go back and any areas where it is pooled up, pounce your brush into those areas and pull the excess out and offload it to a paper towel. Make sense? You don't want it to pool up in the low spots and dry. Okay. Let's set this aside. And I'm going to show you the Santa Claus project. Once again, these were carved by Jerry Boone. Many thanks. Is Jerry here with us tonight?
He is.
He's being so quiet. I haven't heard a peep out of him. How can I get this? It's just messing with me here. Maybe I'll move the camera a little bit more. There we go. So this is the Santa project that he carved. The unpainted one. Looks like this. And once again, it's had its coat of Minwax Natural. And the colors I'm going to apply to this first are, I'm going to do the reds associated with the rope. So I'm going to get a different plate for a palette. I'm going to set that out of the, whoops. Set that out of the way, grab another little paper plate. And on the handout, you can see that there's 3 colors of red listed. Once again, there's a mid-tone and a shadow and a highlight. My mid-tone, I'm using Tomte red, which is more of a burgundy colored red. Your old world Santa Clauses are your European Santas. They're not bright red like fire engine red like the Montgomery Wards and Sears Santa Claus. They're more of a wine colored red. My shadow, I'm going to use antique maroon. And for my highlight, I'm going to use berry red. Okay, I'm also going to get a fresh paper towel for offloading excess water because the one I've got is pretty soaked right now from doing the tree. I just take a paper towel and fold it in quarters, tuck it under my palette so I've got it there handy. And I'm going to take my mid-tone color, which is Tomte red, and I'm going to shake, 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 shaky, 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 and squirt some out on my palette there. I'm going to go back to my big brush, my 1-inch brush, and I'm going to pull some water over to my palette. Yeah, I can't get all this in the screen at the same time. Here, guess that's a little better. Pull some water over. Pull paint into the water until I get the desired consistency. Now, a correct question would be, what consistency? How much water? What is the ratio of paint to water? You know, that's some people have got it figured out where it's like so many drops of paint to a volume of water. The best way is just to, you know, thin it out and try it out, okay? And if it's not thick enough, if you don't get enough coverage, bring some more paint over. Remember, the idea is to paint thin. You want to see wood through the paint. Make sure you get around the sides good. Like I said, this is not a fire engine red. It's more of a burgundy red. Or a wine red. I got to keep tipping my head because I lose my focus. So I never had to wear glasses in my whole life. And here in the last few years, my eyesight has just continuously gotten worse and worse. And so I finally broke down. I had 30 pairs of reading glasses in 3 different strengths located every 4 or 5 feet throughout the house and in the car. And I always had the wrong strength for whatever I was trying to do. And my friends who have been retired a little longer than I have finally convinced me to go down and get an eye exam. They told me that actually I should have probably gotten glasses about 10 years ago. Okay, so looking at that, I can see the wood through the paint real well. I'm thinking if you don't get enough coverage, you can come back and add a little bit more, right? But if you go too thick, that you're hosed. So the idea is it's better to paint it too thin than have to come back and add another thin wash coat to darken it up a little bit than it is to go on there with it too thick from the beginning. Now one time I did have a terrible accident happen in painting, and I was able to go in with turpentine and a toothbrush and scrub the whole thing down. And get most of the paint off it where I could start over. But that in turn raised the grain a bunch and made it look all fuzzy, and it was just all downhill from that. So the trick is, if you want to have a test board, that's a good thing to do. Highly recommend it. So also it's a good idea when you're painting a carving, you want to paint from the low areas out to the high areas when you can, okay? I'm going to do my shading color next with my antique maroon. And for that, I'm going to switch to my 1/2-inch chisel brush, skew chisel brush. And I'm going to bring water over to my paint. Actually, I put water on the palette and I bring a little paint over to the water. I said that wrong. And I'm going to mix up my shadow and start doing some shading around this thing. Now you got to be quick to come back and blend out the transition zone so you don't have hard edges between the 2 colors. So don't try to do too large of an area without doing your blending, because like I said, in Arizona, it dries out real quick. Okay, so there's a little shading around the beard. I'm gonna go up here and do a little shading around the hat in the fold of the hat. And where the trim, the fur trim meets the hat. Okay, a little bit on the arm over here. Turn around where I can see better what I'm doing. I think I'd like a little more shadow right in this area. Okay, lighting. When you're painting, try to always paint with a white light. So not a yellow, not a yellow bulb or incandescent or something like that. The white fluorescents are really good because they give you true colors. If you paint under a yellow light, that's going to mess up your interpretation of what the colors look like. And then when you get it under a different light, it won't look the same. It won't look as true. So there's some shading. And it's funny, but it looks totally different to me than what I'm seeing on the screen when I look at the actual thing here. So there's some CCD camera effect going on with that. So now I'm going to do my highlight color with my berry red. Which is a much brighter color. So I bring water over to the palette. Then I bring a little paint over to the water. Make my wash. Rinse it out, dry it off, blend the edges so there's no hard transition lines. I think a little bit more color right in there would be. So this red is a little more fire engine of a red. And so some areas are going to be more wine colored and some areas are going to be more fire engine red colored. So you have actually multiple colors of red represented in this. So like I said, there should never be any one spot on your carving that is just one flat color. Mix it up, make it more interesting to the eye. That'll catch a judge's attention and you'll do better. Some of you don't really care about what judges think. You just want to get the best looking thing you can. And that's really the proper attitude. I really couldn't care less what judges think. That's because I don't compete anymore. Okay, so there's the red portion of this project. So I said earlier about painting from the inside out. What that means is your lowest areas you want to paint, and then you paint the things that are over the top of those. That just causes you to have less touch-up, having to go back and fix where you slopped a little paint. I see where I missed a little spot on the bottom of his hat here. Just going to go ahead and grab that real quick while I see it. Clean my brush out. So my next color that I would think that would be the most inside out working color is going to be this inside of the sleeve over here. It's a deep area. I'm just going to take my shadow color, my antique maroon, which is a dark color, and I'm going to go in there and just darken that up. Okay. The next lowest area I would think would be Santa's face. So I'm gonna base coat the face with one called Santa's Flesh. It sounds pretty grisly, but it's a nice peachy kind of a skin tone color. So since this has had some time to dry out, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and apply some more water to the face, because there's going to be a little shading on the face. And like I said, these soft painting steps are where you're trying to get your subtle shading. You don't want any hard lines at this point. Okay, so I'm gonna shaky, shaky, shake every time. Shake the paint before you squirt any out. Put some on the palette, a little bit will do. And I'm gonna bring another second color, which is Caucasian flesh, which is a little darker of a flesh tone. I'm gonna put some of that on the palette as well. And I've got that next to my red. I'm going to use the red to mix in there to get a little pinkish color on the bottoms of the nose and the cheeks. Okay, no area should be just one solid color. So I'm going to wet my brush, put some water on the palette, bring a little bit of Santa's flesh over to it, mix up a wash, and I'm going to go in and paint the face real quick. So I haven't heard anything from any comments from Jerry Boone. I will relate to you a Jerry Boone comment or a reaction. Normally he don't carve no Santa Clauses. He don't carve cutesy stuff. He doesn't do fuzzy bunnies and teddy bears or any of that stuff. He does massive ships figureheads and, you know, Statue of Liberty and acanthus leaves and all sorts of cool looking stuff, which actually I think one of his pieces has actually been in print in that British wood carving magazine. So before this dries, I'm going to pull a little bit of that darker Caucasian flesh paint onto my brush, and I'm going to do the areas where the eyes are. I want the flesh to be a little darker around the eyes. Now I'm going to rinse my brush out, come back and blend so there's no hard edges. Blend, blend, blend. There, that's going to work out good. Now I'm going to pull a little bit of the berry red into the Santa's flesh to pink it up a little bit. And we're going to make him look like it's a cold day for Santa Claus. We're going to pink up his cheeks and the bottom of his nose. Not the entire nose. The entire nose being pink looks more like he's been drinking. And we're going for the blush that you get on a cold winter's day at the North Pole or wherever. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that, shaded out pretty good. So I don't know if you can see that on the screen. Boy, this dyslexia thing just gets me every time. But he's a little, yeah, it doesn't really show up on the screen like it does in front of me here. But maybe that's because of that overhead light is too much. Let me test this out a moment. Is that better?
No,
No.
it's different. It's radically different. It's almost like it put it in shadow in a two color thing.
Yeah, well, we're just going to have to go with it. While I'm here in the soft painting mode, my next step is to take that pinkish tone that I've made and paint his mouth structures. It's got lips. So there I've painted the lips in. And the smallest brush I've used up to this point is like a 1/2 inch brush. So at this point, the next most inside thing would probably be this this flower pot up here, because the glove is over the flower pot. So I'm going to take a color called Georgia Clay, and I'm going to put that on. Same technique, shake it up first. Put a little bit out on the palette. Seal them good when you're done. Bring water over to the palette. Bring paint to the water. Create a wash. And this makes a nice terracotta pot kind of a color. And so there are hundreds and hundreds of these different pre-mixed colors available in Delta Ceram Coat, Americana, and other companies are like Folk Art. I don't know if that one's still around. Okay, so there's the clay pot. While I'm here, I'm going to go and just muddy up some of that antique maroon that I had into some of this Georgia clay just to make a dark, a dark color. And I'm going to paint the inside, the top of the pot where Jerry had put like a hole in there. So it looks like he's going to add like a plant, some sort of either a plastic holly or something into that pot to make it look like, let's see, let me turn this to the camera, right? Boy, the dyslexia is really getting me tonight. Where is it?
Right
there it is.
Yep, right there.
So that's just supposed to be dirt in the pot.
Jeff, what goes into the pot is actually it's a brass rod that I shaped to form this sort of Christmas tree looking piece.
Well,
so you got a piece of thin brass, and it wiggles back and forth, gets narrower and narrower at the top. So he's basically sort of holding a stylized Christmas tree.
Well, that's really cool. You'll have to send out pictures when you do that, because I'm not doing that. You get to do that step when I hand these to you. Okay. So the next thing that's, on the inside or the lowest part where other things are over the top of would be Santa's facial hair. So for that, I'm going to use an antique white. So it's not your bright white, your titanium white. It's an antique white. Shaky, shaky, shaky. And I may have to go grab another plate. I'm running out of palette space here with these small plates. So I'm going to go grab real quick. I'm going to grab another plate. Okay. Now, what time are we at? We're at 8 o'clock. So we're running till 9. Is that correct?
We can run as long or short as you like.
Well, good night. No, I want to make sure I reserve about 10 minutes at least at the end of the painting phase for cleaning, proper care and maintenance of brushes. Because if you don't clean your brushes out good, you might as well just throw them away, because next time you go to use them, they'll be no good. Okay, so I got my antique white. Bring some water over to the palette. Bringing that water over, I'm going to pull a little paint over into it. Make my wash. And I'm going to start painting his beard, mustache, and eyebrows. I can't stress enough how with acrylics, you have to get the paint on there quick. You got to do it quick. You can't sit there like with oils and, you know, fuss around with it and get it just perfect. There are some painter's mediums that you can add to your acrylic paints, which will slow down the drying process. I've found quite often that those painter's mediums for acrylics also kind of increase the transparency, or they make it more like a glaze or something. And that's something to experiment around with. I don't have a lot of experience with the extenders, but people that do a lot of acrylic painting on canvases, they would probably have more experience with that. People like Jim, who's like a real painter. I am a wood carver. who happens to paint his carvings. My initial training on painting for wood carvings, I received all my training from Kelly Stadelman, also pronounced Stadelman, from the North Plains area. She is a fantastic decorative painter. And I believe she started out in the toll painting world and then got into carving, making her own designs. And she's really got the skill set. She's published several books on the topic. And I believe that Mr. Larry there has met with her or talked to her or is attempting to rope her into doing some instructional stuff. She used to have a school of wood carving out in North Plains called Heritage Art Studio. It was a great place. I miss it. It was that one brief shining moment, the Camelot of art schools in an area where there are no art schools, Washington County. So there's the beard, the mustache, or the moustache, and the eyebrows, soft painted. Let's see if I can get that back around where you can see it. So you notice these colors are subtle. They're not glaring. That's what you want, is subtle coloration, especially when you're in your soft painting mode. Okay, so now the next thing would be the mittens. And what did I have listed here for the mittens? I believe I'm using Christmas green. I think the Christmas green has a little bit too much of a bluish content. So I'm going to mix a little of my deep river green in with it to kind of tone down the blue content a little bit. Okay. And then I'll do a little highlighting with the Hauser light green, which is the yellowy green. So I'm going to put those three colors on my palette to work with there. And I'm going to grab my chisel brush and I'm going to put water on my palette. So notice I'm not adding water to paint. I'm bringing paint to water. That is an important step in learning how to thin paint. If you put a bunch of paint on there and then try to add water to it until you get the right consistency, you're going to end up with a whole, like a bowl full of paint before you get it thinned out enough. So that's in the quiz, children. You bring paint to your water. You don't bring water to your paint. So on my wire carousels full of all my little bottles of paint that I have one whole side that has probably 50 different colors of green. And then I have another side that has like 50 different colors of red. And I have a blue, you know, all the blues, and I have all the yellows and all the earth tones and the browns and grays and beiges and cream colors. So I have them kind of sorted out like that, so it's easy at a glance to find a color. But like I said, I don't worry about the names of them. I look at the color and choose, you know, what I want to see in my painting. But a lot of people, they do it strictly by the names, you know, because the various teachers and the books that you get, you know, the instructional books on carving projects and stuff, they'll have colors listed there. And if you go by those exact colors, you'll get the exact color scheme. And then clean the brush out, come back with a damp brush and blend, blend, blend. And there's the mittens. Okay, so now that leaves the fur trim on Santa's robe, sleeves and around his face. For that, I'm gonna start with ivory as my mid-tone. And I'm going to use a little bit of the raw sienna to shade around the edges. What we're going for here is supposed to look like sheep's wool. Old world Santas, not polyester. Right? If it's really white, it would be like polyester. We're going for sheep's wool, which is not white. So I'm going to put some ivory on my palette. Come on. Ooh, that's real thick and gloppy. This is an old bottle of paint. And it's nearing the end of the trail. And here's my raw sienna. So I'm making pretty good time through this tonight. That's good. Okay. So there's my ivory. and my shading, my shadow raw sienna. So I'm going to bring the water over here. And thin out some of that. That ivory is about as thick as toothpaste. So that's probably a 10-year-old bottle of paint. Maybe about time to retire that. Now, like little touch-ups, because occasionally you're gonna, something isn't gonna flow the way you think, and you're gonna get a little paint where you don't want it. Little touch-ups. You would do with small brushes. And you could do a lot of that in the detail or hard painting phase. So let's see. So it's taking a little getting used to these progressive lenses. I have to keep reminding myself that if I'm having problems seeing it, I can tip my head a little bit. I hear that that's something that you get used to over time. I am not used to it yet. Yeah, the color blindness thing. That's kind of a weird sciencey thing. Not hardly any of the gals have color blindness. That's a guy thing. It's a genetic thing. And I'm, very happy that I don't have it. It comes in various degrees. Some guys are a little bit colorblind. Some guys are totally colorblind. They see, a world of browns and grays. And for those people, painting they should just stick to stains, because stains have the name on the can. And you know that cherry stain looks like cherry wood. So if that's what you're going for, you buy a can of stain. You don't have to worry about what shade. Okay, so there's my fleece color on there. Now I'm going to come back with a little bit smaller brush. This is just a smaller, maybe a 1/4 of an inch round brush, and do a little bit of that raw sienna shading around the edges. Where did my brush go? I just had it a moment ago. Where the heck? Oh, there it is. I think I'll use this 1/4 inch filbert because it's handy. So once again, what do I start with? Water or paint? Water. Get it wrong. Bring water to the palette and then bring paint to the water. And I'm going to apply this around the edges of the fleece area. And then blend. And that's a little thin. I think I'm going to bring a little more paint over into that. Just a little. You don't want to overcompensate and go from too thin to way too thick. Because if you get it too thin, you can always do a second coat. But if you get it too thick, you're hosed. Now, preferably, I am an oil painter. I love painting in oils because you can blend and then go away for a week and come back and then work on it some more and blend it some more. And when I'm painting on wood with oils, I don't use linseed oil and turpentine. I use Minwax Natural product number 209 to thin my oil paints with. So that way I'm always making custom stains for the wood, because that's all wood stains are, is oil for the vehicle and then crushed up dirt and earth and minerals and various stuff that they add to that to put the pigment part of the stain. And I think the best looking effects on wood are definitely done with oils. But it's a different technique and it's messier. It doesn't kill your brushes like acrylics do. So if you're going to work in oils, you can use your $30 expensive brushes and they'll be fine. In acrylics, I don't recommend using expensive brushes at all. And for your acrylics, you're going to want to use brushes that are synthetic hair brushes. So they're designed more for acrylics. And don't go out and buy the $30 ones. The $10 ones will do just fine, because acrylics eventually kill your brushes. Okay, so with that in mind, all the soft painting steps on this project are complete. Maybe if I just try to move the camera, I'll have better luck with this. There we go. So that is all the steps that need to be done before I would put the topical sealer on. Let me go get that topical sealer. Sealer. Here we go. So this is the Americana multi-purpose sealer. That was not that instructive, was it? All right. let's see. So both these pieces, none of the detail painting's been done, just the soft blending steps. And they'll both get a coat of that sealer on them, and they'll need like 30 minutes or so to dry. And don't let it pool up down to the low spots. Paint a good, make sure you get the entire surface of it covered, but then come back and with an offloaded brush, pounce into the low areas and pull any excess that pools up in the low areas, pull that out and offload it on your paper towel. A lot of talking going on there. Now would be a good time for questions. And
There
I'll
are a
get
few,
some,
Jeff. Yep.
and I'll prep
There
some
are-
stuff for cleaning brushes.
One question is, do you ever paint the back? Why or why not?
That's strictly a matter of choice. Some judges want the bottoms and the backs painted and all that. It's kind of a personal preference. It should be done such that when it's on display, you can't see any of the unpainted surfaces. So I would say, you know, go ahead and take the time and paint the backs and the bottoms. I have heard judges say, don't paint the bottoms because they want to be able to tip them up and look and make sure that it's not like, you know, a resin cast or something, right? They want to see some wood on the bottom to see that it really started as a piece of wood. Also, some judges look at the bottoms of wood carvings to see if they have that telltale rough out Duplo router attachment point, because some judges differentiate. You better be in a rough outs only category or else you're going to lose points because you didn't design and carve the thing. You carved it from a rough out. And that depends on the show. Each show has a set of rules that they go by. But you know, if you've got the time, go ahead and paint the back. It doesn't take that much paint, doesn't take that much time. I didn't go through those steps here tonight because that's not exciting or educational.
So if you were painting the back of these, would you paint them now? I mean,
Yeah, before you put your sealer on, certainly.
Yeah. So Michael asked,
And I would just paint the back of Santa red, and I would paint the back of the Christmas tree green. I wouldn't do all the shading and all the 3 different colors and all that. I would just, you know, give it a, you know, solid coat or a wash of just one color.
Michael, a different question. He said, my acrylics darken as they dry. Does the Minwax natural prevent this?
No, all paint changes its color a little bit as it dries. Some would say that it doesn't darken, it brightens. Like the color becomes more color fast or more vibrant when it dries.
A different question is, if you have errant drops of paint,
Errant drops of paint.
yeah, they goober up somewhere. But
Goobers.
you didn't.
Okay.
You goobered paint, right? Did you just let it alone and then come back and
No,
try to cover up?
if you drop paint on there, when you drop it, quickly get a wet, clean brush and try to lift the drop off there. Don't scrub it in, but try to lift it off. Because while it's wet, you'll be able to get a lot of it off there. Another trick, this is a Kelly Stadelman trick, is keep a small bottle of hand sanitizer in your area when you're painting. And if you have one of those accidents, the hand sanitizer has alcohol in it. And with a little bit of paper towel and hand sanitizer, you can lift that off of there. It won't lift it 100% off, but it'll lift it off enough that then you can come back with the color that it was supposed to be and kind of touch it up a little bit and make it not, you know, make it not be apparent. So hand sanitizer the alcohol-based hand sanitizer is a good thing for fixing boo-boos. The
Okay.
best thing is just not to have boo-boos.
A different question is, how long will the thin paints on your palette be useful?
In Arizona, about 2.5 minutes. And then they're dry. You throw them away.
So,
No,
so the ones you have now are dried up. They're not useful.
yeah, there's some of the thick stuff that I didn't completely use in making my washes that is still, it's got a skin over it already, but there's still good paint in there. But, you know, throw those away. Don't try to save those. That's just silliness to try to, you know, put cling wrap or something over it, keep it in the fridge, and it's going to acrylics dry out, right? So if you noticed, I put out enough paint to do the job, but I didn't like use like a whole plate full of paint. And because if you need more, you can always get more. But I'm going to throw away those blobs of paint that I didn't use. I'm not going to try to preserve those. That's silliness.
Yeah.
These little bottles of paint only cost, if you get them on sale, they're like $1.25 or something, right? You're not spending a lot of money on your paint in the acrylic world. You'll definitely spend more on good quality artist oil paint for oil painting than you will spend on the types of acrylics that we use on these guys. Now, there are more expensive acrylic paints out there, the Josanja acrylic paints in tubes. Those are much creamier, better, you know, better crushed, finely crushed pigments in them, better mixed. Those are like the Cadillacs of acrylic paints, as far as I'm concerned. That's good stuff. And I have those around, but I figured these little cheap bottles of paint are what most people have access to. So I'm trying to give you what, you know, what is most useful to most people.
Jeff, a different question. Ultimately, it's related to brushes and preserving them, but your camera didn't show the water you're using to clean out your brushes, where you park the brushes in between using them, how you're using the
Right there.
paper towel to clean it out, those kind of things.
The paper towels just the paper towel just sits under your palette, just right next to it, so you can do the offloading of excess water and stuff. The brushes are right here in the coil, and they are bristles down so that the water and the paint doesn't flow up into the ferrule. Let me move some of this out of the way so you get some contrast on that image.
So you just have one pot of water and it's just kind of muddy water right now.
Sure.
And so you're using that, you use that same pot to clean all the colors at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I don't worry about the polluting of the purity of the colors of the paint, because I spend most of my time degrading the purity of the color anyway by mixing and shading and doing stuff. That little bit of paint that's in that slightly murky water there is not going to affect at all the color that you end up with on the carving. The paint is much more vibrant.
So is that a high-tech paintbrush holder, water dispenser?
This is your standard art school paintbrush holder. You can get them at any art supply store. Don't use the buckets, plastic buckets where the brushes go in. You put the handles in and they're up like that. That helps destroy your brushes. I have probably half a dozen of those buckets, plastic buckets, because they're convenient for classes when people don't bring their own stuff. But I never use them.
What kind of brush will you use to put on the sealer?
A cheap brush, like those, you know, things where you get like a dozen brushes for $8.
Are you talking about disposable chip brushes from?
No, they're not.
Or?
No, not those, because hairs come off of those and stay on your carpet. You don't want that cheap. No, like every now and then the art supply stores, they have these deals on paintbrushes, you know, where there are a bunch of they're just low quality wooden handle paintbrushes, but they're high enough quality that the bristles don't fall out.
I might have missed questions. I try to pay attention to the chat. I don't see any more, Jeff. Does anybody else have a question they would like to put in the chat or shout out?
If
Jeff?
not, I'm gonna clean some brushes here. I'm gonna talk about cleaning brushes.
Okay.
So I have here this Duo Aqua Oil brush cleaner for acrylic paints that I bought at an art store somewhere. And I'm sure it's you know, distilled water, a little bit of lanolin, probably a little bit of alcohol in it, isopropyl. You know, the alcohol-based hand sanitizer works really well, and it's much cheaper than this. But I think I got this, you know, I was shopping, right? So I'm going to use it. But what I do is I just pour some of this into a little container, a little plastic container that I've got. A little bit goes a long way. And then I'll take a brush that I'm going to clean, and I will first, you know, clean it out good. This brush holder has a little brush cleaner insert in the bottom there. I don't know if you can see that in there. So that helps you clean your brush out a little bit. And then I'll offload that on the paper towel. Then I'll put it in the brush cleaner solution and gently brush it around. The key to maintaining your brushes, like I said, is never insert your brushes into the paint all the way up to the ferrule. You never want to get more than half your brush coated with acrylic paint. And I see, usually it's the guys, I hate to pick on the guys, but they'll have paint all the way up to the wooden part of the handle. So I just gently clean that back and forth, and then kind of against the side of the thing, squeeze the excess back into there.
So
Okay,
Jeff, shift your camera or move your little cleaner bowl up into the viewpoint.
There's nothing to see there.
No, other way. There we go, right there.
Well, let me move Santa out of the way. Like I said, there's nothing exciting to see there. It's just a little plastic thing with some clear solution. Clear solution in it.
We're watching the finesse of your wrist motion as you clean it
Well,
out.
I'm just gently, you know, going back and forth with it. And then I kind of squeegee it against the sides to put the excess back in there. Now I have this product here called Brush Shaper. And all the words are backwards on the screen. That says Brush Shaper. And
they're okay for us.
And I don't know what's in it, but it's a wonderful stuff. And what you do, it's just kind of a thick, goopy stuff in there. And you take your brush and you insert it into the brush shaper. And then use your fingers to squeegee the excess back in. And then that will dry and it'll maintain the shape of the brush. So when you come to use it again, it won't be all puffed out looking like a sea anemone or something. Get another paper towel here, and I'll repeat that step. So you got to clean your brushes out, people. I don't know how many times I have taught classes, and at the end of the class, I come back into the classroom and I find brushes with paint all over them, and then people will leave them with paint on them and lay them down on the table, and then they dry there, and I come in and they're glued to the table. And they usually do that with my brushes because, you know, other people's brushes. And I don't know how many brushes I've had that I get one or two uses out of, and I have to throw them away because somebody did not take proper care of them. And I have people come to classes where they bring their own brushes, and what they bring to class is unusable. See, that puts the nice chisel shape back on there and keeps it from being all fanned out and fuzzy looking. And I used this guy here. No, I didn't. I used this filbert. So a filbert brush, I've been using skew chisel brushes. A filbert brush is kind of has a thumbnail shape to it. They're really handy for painting feathers and flower petals. So now my brushes are clean. And I can put them away and they'll be ready to use next time. So it's like proper tool maintenance, right? Your brushes, if you're painting, your brushes are your tools. And you want to take good care of your tools. All right, more questions.
There's an FYI that says isopropyl alcohol will dissolve acrylic paint, but it will also destroy the glue that holds the bristles
Right.
of the barrel.
Yes, it will. If you're using a alcohol-based hand sanitizer as a brush cleaner, the lanolin that's in that kind of works against the isopropyl alcohol. They kind of balance each other out a little bit, and just try not to get that stuff all the way up into the ferrule. Try to keep it on the bristles of the brush. Now, all the brushes I've used here tonight were all synthetic bristle brushes. I didn't have any sable brushes. Those are the expensive ones you want to use for oil painting. These are all synthetic bristle brushes. And usually in the art store, they'll have a section in the paintbrush area that is acrylic brushes. Stick with those. Ducking out early from Christopher Holmes. Okay, Chris. So I hope this has been useful.
Yeah. So Jeff, there's another question about the name of the cleaning solution. Was that in your handout?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Or
Probably,
hand sanitize, or hand
probably
sanitize.
at the end. It was probably at the end of the thing.
So another question is, how do you store your brushes when they're not being used?
Okay. For the cheapo brushes, I've got a big coffee can and I put them in there, handles first. But for my nicer brushes that I travel around with, I have one of these zip up paintbrush caddy things from I think Craft Warehouse that came with 8 or 10 cheap brushes like this. And those are the ones that I use for, putting sealers and stuff onto the cheapy brushes. But yeah, if you're traveling with the stuff, a zip up paintbrush caddy is a nice way to go, because then you can fill up all the little slots with the brushes you have, and then at the end of the thing whether somebody is, taking one of your brushes and get all your brushes back.
Okay. Jeff, I think that's the end of the question. There's a pointer that there's a setting in your video things that will allow you to mirror your screen so that it appears correct to you. What you showed us is just fine. But
Okay.
There's a setting that will deal with what apparent dyslexia.
Very good.
Next time, so in between now and then, you will put the sealer on, let that dry, and then you will. The next week we'll walk through the detailed painting steps of each one of those. Is that correct?
That's what we're going to do.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll call it quits. We'll let Jeff go to bed, and those of us that are night owls will stay up and do some carving. But Jeff, thank you very much. It worked flawlessly as far as I'm concerned. The Zoom work, we lost you for that 30, 45 seconds, but that was the only hiccup.
Yeah, that must have been my Wi-Fi cutting out. I have Cox Wi-Fi, but I'm not paying for the business quality.
Who knows? Who knows what the universe coughs up between 7 and 8 o'clock every night? Okay, everyone, I'm going to stop the recording, and then it will be posted up if you want to review it. But take a look at the notes, and then come prepared with questions next time. I hope you can make it back.
Once again, thanks to Jerry Boone for carving these extra large size Christmas ornaments. So we've got something to work on. Being bigger definitely works out better for class purpose because I think people can see it better. So this is good.
I carved those, Jeff, before you got your glasses.
Oh, yeah, right. I did make some modifications to them.
I saw that. Thank you very much. They looked a lot better than when you got them.
I didn't do much. I really didn't do much. All right. Well, if that's
Okay.
it,
You
then
bet. Thank you
I'm gonna sign off then.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Jeff.
See you next week.
See you next week.